What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss even more iOS 18 and 18.1 beta features and changes. We're going to talk about a very controversial take on the Find My network, fresh new iPhone 16 details, a crazy AirTags story, and much more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And if you prefer a written format, check out the Apple Den newsletter, which is linked down in the description below. So this past week was insane. We got a ton of software updates, including iOS and iPadOS 18.1 beta 1, iOS and iPadOS 17.6. We got iOS 18 public beta 2, and a lot more. There were a ton of software updates this week, but I first want to start by talking about even more iOS 18.1 beta 1, and then we will also talk about iOS 18 beta features and changes. So let's start with iOS 18.1 beta 1. Now, if you missed my video where I detailed all the new changes in 18.1, along with a separate video where I went in depth with the Apple Intelligence features specifically, I will leave those videos linked down below and also in the top right in the cards if you missed those videos. So first off, I want to talk about Siri because we don't have Siri 2.0 here with iOS 18.1 beta 1. However, Siri is a little bit smarter, and something I also noticed is that Siri has a different voice. It's a slightly altered voice that Siri has now, and I also noticed that it doesn't give you back-to-back notifications anymore. So for example, if I had, a Google Home, a lot of times it would give me the same notification twice. It would tell me the same thing twice in my ears when I have AirPods in, but now it only says that notification once. So it seems like notifications, announcing notifications seems to be better and maybe more summarized now than what we had in previous versions of Siri, but we still don't have the full Siri 2.0 just yet for those of you wondering about that. It is better with context, but all the additional features like using Safari or using Siri in third-party applications, that's coming in a future version. So I want to talk about something I've never seen from Apple before, and that is a feedback leveling system. You can actually level up in the feedback application now. So if you're on the iOS 18.1 betas, and I hope they bring this to iOS 18.0 as well, but there's a new section here for rate your experiences, and this is on the Mac as well. So if you go into this, you actually get to choose thumbs up or thumbs down if that was a good summary of the message. So if I put yes, for example, it will go on to the next one and it will keep asking you for your feedback and you will level up. You can see the levels in the top right there. So you level up no matter if you choose, yes or no. And you can see right here, it says you made it to level 1. And you also get the option to share detailed feedback as well if you would like to. Otherwise, you could just keep going on to the next email and you can see I made it to level 2 and so forth. So it's pretty cool that Apple has done that and it shows the level right there as well. They're really just encouraging more people to submit feedback, especially for something as pivotal as Apple Intelligence, where it's going to take a lot of beta testing to get it right. Now, I also wanted to discuss the reduce interruptions focus mode. So this is a new focus mode in iOS 18.1 beta 1. However, if you have one device with iOS 18.1, iPadOS 18.1, or macOS Sequoia 15.1 beta 1, if you have reduce interruptions, on those devices and you turn it on, you will notice that on your iOS 18.0 devices, you get that same notification there. You get that same focus mode in those versions, which is interesting. Now, it does not work, so you're going to be able to see this iOS 18.1 Apple Intelligence feature on older versions like 18.0, but it does not actually work. But I just found that to be interesting. It also even showed up on my Apple Watch, which is quite interesting, which means that that was in the code all along. Now, also, if we go into our settings here and then go down to focus and we go into one of our existing focus modes. So if I go to recording a video, for example, you'll notice we also have a new toggle up top for intelligent breakthrough and silencing. So you can actually add, Apple Intelligence to these focus modes, which to me kind of defeats the purpose of having a reduce interruptions, focus mode altogether, but it is cool that it's there. And I like that you can add this in existing focus modes as well, but I'm not going to do that for this one specifically. Now, something else I found interesting is that you can actually see exactly how much storage space Apple Intelligence takes up on your iOS, iPadOS, or macOS device. So if you go into your settings, if we go to general and then to iPhone storage, and we go all the way down to the bottom and then go into iOS, there's a new section here for Apple Intelligence. And you can see it takes up nearly 3 gigabytes on my 15 Pro Max. Now, I'd assume the size is going to be about the same for the Pro series as well, and it will be larger on the Mac. So it was much bigger on macOS, but it's cool that you can actually see how much storage it's taking up on your device. And that could explain why it took longer for some people to activate, Apple Intelligence, because when it was downloading, it had to download a relatively large file size there to get the models on your device. Now, again, I did already make a full video on Apple Intelligence. So if you want to see all the Apple Intelligence features, you can go watch that video. I just wanted to touch on a few of them right here that I feel like are game changers, that are really a much bigger deal than it seems. And I'm going to start with one that I really think is going to make a big impact in the future and the really near future. And that is the ability to have the preview text for emails show a summary of that email. And the reason I think this is a massive game changer, not just for us to be able to see, content easier, but I think this is going to really disrupt the email marketing game, because the preview text, if you subscribe to my newsletter, theappleden.com, you know that I type out, what that preview text says, so I can kind of, entice you to open up the email. And that's what everybody does, especially with newsletters. Well, now that's going to be pretty much, non-existent on the iPhone. So I think that's going to really disrupt email marketing again. Apple has done this time and time again for mail, and it's happening again here with Apple Intelligence. So this is great for us. It's potentially not so great for email marketers, which is probably a good thing for you guys, so you don't get clickbaited into clicking in an email when it didn't contain, exactly what you thought it was going to contain. So this is awesome. And it also helps, when there's a lot of fluff at the top of an email, or when the preview text just doesn't show anything at all. This helps you actually see what's inside of that email. So this is something I've been loving, and I think is a big game changer that's really being overlooked by a lot of people. And then of course we have these summarized notifications on the lock screen as well, from both mail and for messages. So I've really been liking this for messages, especially in group chats. So you can see that here's one just from one contact where there were 5 messages, and it summarized that in just a quick sentence. And I have to say that the AI generated replies here, these smart replies, you can see the really cool animation there. I have to say that they're better than I expected. They're still not great. I wouldn't really call them great. Sometimes they're very mundane and kind of just like, very short, and it can kind of come across as passive aggressive, but it's actually pretty awesome how they work. So let me show you a better example here. So somebody asked if we can start preparing this weekend, and you can see that the options down there are sure or sorry, I'm busy this weekend. And if we select that, it puts it in there, and you can just go ahead and send it from there. So it's pretty good at understanding the context. It could be better, but it's good for messages. I think it's actually great for email. It's much better for email, I think, because that's more professional. So it works better in email, but it also works fine in messages. Now, as far as the ChatGPT integration, it looks like that's going to come in the form of Tap to Siri. So this section right here looks like where we're going to get, the ChatGPT integration eventually. Now, we got confirmation from Tim Cook himself during Apple's Q3 earnings call. He did confirm that ChatGPT integration is coming this year. So we should see that in one of the future betas for iOS 18.1. Now, there was also a change in the App Store with iOS 18.1 Beta 1 that nobody's really talking about because it's kind of small anyways, but I still found it to be pretty interesting. So if I search for anything in the App Store, you'll notice that we now have a new look for the number, the chart number for that application. So you can see it's over here on the left now. So Subway Surfers, it shows number 2 in action. Candy Crush shows number 12 in puzzle, and so on. 8 Ball is number 1 in sports. Before, in iOS 18.0 and earlier, it had a different look, and it was also to the right of all this information. So slightly new look there for that in App Store. Now, if you're on iOS 18 Beta 4 or iOS 18 Public Beta 2, you would know that my keyboard here looks a little bit different than yours for the emojis, and that's because it's much bigger here. And this is what we saw in a previous iOS 18 beta, but it was reverted back in the latest betas to be smaller and like it was in iOS 17. However, I would expect this to come in iOS 18 Beta 5 and Public Beta 3. It's probably going to go back to this, which I predicted a while back. So you can see that we have these stickers down here and the emojis all built in to this specific keyboard. Now, unfortunately, the recent emojis are still broken, so it shows a bunch of emojis that I don't even use and stickers I don't even use. So you're not alone. That is still broken for me, even on 18.1. So it's broken on iOS 18 and on iOS 18.1, which is really frustrating because now I have to search for every emoji that I want to use. And also the searching for stickers is back as well. So you can search for a sticker if it knows the name of somebody, and you can see my cat shows up there if I search for his name. We also have a new state that's been added to the driver's license on iPhone. So if you go to the wallet app and go to the plus on the top right and go to driver's license or state ID, there's a new state there. So we now have Ohio as a state with the ability to have your driver's license on your iPhone, which is awesome. There's also a really cool animation, which you can see right here. So hopefully this comes to Florida where I'm at soon, but we're still stuck with just these 5 states right here for now. And of course, this is not exclusive to iOS 18. This will also show up on iOS 17. Now, I also wanted to talk about something interesting because we now have the ability to download torrenting applications in the EU via AltStore, which is the third-party app store in the EU. And they just introduced 4 new applications, and 3 of them are for torrenting. So iTorrent is one of them, which lets you download P2P files and even has Files app support and live activities. I never thought we'd see the day where we have torrenting applications with live activity support on the iPhone. What a time. Also this week, Google added nice new features to the Google Maps application and also a big new feature to Waze, which isn't here yet, but it's coming soon. So first off, with Google Maps, they announced a new incident reporting feature. So this is just like we see on Waze and Apple Maps, where you can mark the police, traffic, and construction. And then they also added destination guidance, which helps you navigate where to enter or park at a destination. And it kind of highlights and lights up the building and the entrance, and it shows you nearby parking. And then also for Waze, there's now camera alerts, there's traffic events, which notifies you when there's traffic impacts due to events like parades and concerts. And then the big one here is lock screen navigation. So finally, we'll be able to have turn-by-turn directions and real-time traffic updates from the lock screen on your iPhone with Waze. Now, this is not here yet, it's coming in the fall, but this is going to be a big deal for those that use Waze like myself. And by the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, I make these videos every single weekend, so if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button down below. Now let's talk about the performance, because performance on iOS 18 and iOS 18.1 is pretty solid. I've actually not had very many bugs whatsoever on either version. So I'm still running iOS 18 beta 4 on a secondary device, and now I'm running iOS 18.1 beta 1 on my primary device. And for iOS 18 beta 4, aka public beta 2, they're both the same. The performance on those versions is actually pretty solid. I think it's the best performance yet for iOS 18, and it's not really any different this week than what I talked about in last week's episode. So no change there. Now, as far as iOS 18.1 beta 1, I did run a Geekbench score or a test before recording this video, and you can see we scored a 2836 on the single core and a 6977 on the multi-core. And we can see here that is slightly higher than what we scored on iOS 18 beta 4, which is quite interesting. So performance could be a tad better here on iOS 18.1 beta 1 than what we saw on iOS 18 beta 4. It doesn't tell the full story, but that's just what these scores will tell you. But I've had really no issues so far. Now, when it comes to battery life, that's a different story. So iOS 18 beta 4, aka public beta 2, battery life is not bad. It's not great. It's definitely not as good as iOS 17, but the battery life is not too bad. It's still a beta, so you're not expecting great battery life. However, with iOS 18.1 beta 1, battery life is awful. Battery life is trash on iOS 18.1 beta 1. So that's to be expected. I mean, we have the Apple Intelligence features running in the background. We have a lot of feedback going on, sending this feedback to Apple servers. There's just a lot going on with iOS 18.1 beta 1. So I was never expecting great battery life, but man, is it pretty bad. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So I don't think we're going to see quite as crazy of a release next week as we saw this week. We're probably not going to see that again until September. But anyways, next week is the week of August 5th, and I would expect to see Apple release release iOS 18 Beta 5 and then also public Beta 3. So we're going to see a new iOS 18.0 beta next week. So Apple typically releases these on Tuesday, but they have done Mondays as well. So really, any day early next week, I would expect to see iOS 18 Beta 5. Now, I don't think that we're going to see another iOS 18.1 beta just yet. We're probably going to be on a 2-week schedule. So maybe on the week of August 12th is when we can expect to see the next iOS 18.1 beta. Now, I also wanted to answer the question, will we see iOS 18.1 betas on older devices that are not the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max? And I would say that I have no idea. There's a lot of scenarios at play here just because of the new iPhone 16s coming out next month. There's a lot of scenarios, so I do not know if we're going to see iOS 18.1 betas on older devices or not. If we do, it probably will not be until Beta 2 or potentially even Beta 3. I don't think that we're going to see a random 18.1 Beta 1 for older devices get released next week, like some people have speculated. I just don't see that happening. Because we did hear that iOS 18.1 is not going to be released to the public until sometime in October. So even when the iPhone 16s come out, they might not have iOS 16.1 or iOS 18.1, at launch, which will be quite a disappointment, I have to say, but they won't have to wait very long. The iPhone 16s won't have to wait very long to get 18.1 because it will come within a few weeks after release. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And since you guys watch these Apple Weekly episodes every weekend, you know that I always give you guys a story related to the AirTags and the Find My network and how they always save people or they put people who steal things behind bars. They just do great things. However, it seems like not everybody thinks that way. And I say this because Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney thinks that the whole Find My network is super creepy surveillance tech that shouldn't exist. Yeah, he actually posted this on X, and his reasoning for that opinion is even more bizarre. So he said that years ago, a kid stole a Mac laptop out of my car. Years later, I was checking out Find My, and it showed a map with the house where the kid who stole my Mac lived. And if you're thinking what I'm thinking, that's a good thing, right? Like just call the cops and say, hey, I have the location of the person who stole my laptop. Well, that's not what he was thinking, because he said you can't track the location of a device that's in someone's possession without tracking that person, and people have a right to privacy. This right applies to secondhand device buyers and even to thieves. And while yes, I do agree with the sentiment that, we do have a right to privacy, this is a different story. Somebody stole your laptop. If somebody stole my laptop, I would want to know where that person is so I can call the police and get my possessions back. I don't think that this right applies to somebody committing a crime. And for all you know, that person can be stealing your information. So why would you not want to know the location of that person so you can track them down and potentially get your items back? So that take does not make any sense to me, but if you guys agree or disagree, let me know in a comment down below. Now, moving on, we have some fresh details on the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro, and we now have details of the colors. So you can see right here, these are the potential colors for the iPhone 16. So we have white, black, blue, green, and pink. And these models also show off Apple's redesigned camera bump, which is expected for the 16 and 16 Plus. So now has that vertical bump. Now for the iPhone 16 Pro, those colors are not very exciting as expected. So we see black, white, and a natural color right here. However, we did hear that we might have a bronze color instead of the natural little silver look there. And then also a rose gold, which is not colored, but the rose gold color is expected to replace blue titanium. Now, of course, the final design is not going to look just like these dummy models. They're usually pretty off when it comes to the exact color hue. So they're probably not going to be as saturated as you see right here because of the materials used and everything. But this gives us a good look at what we can actually expect in terms of color. So let me know what your favorite color is down in the comment below. I really am looking forward to a green iPhone 16. Oh, and also the bronze iPhone 16 Pro could look really interesting if it's actually like a bronze, like a kind of orangish hue to it. I think that could be pretty interesting. We also heard that the iPhone 16 Pro models are expected to support Wi-Fi 7, which is going to give increased speeds and efficiency, especially if you have a Wi-Fi 7 router. And we also heard that Apple is set to assemble the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max in India this year for the first time ever. And we also got a leak on the battery capacity for the iPhone 16 Pro and and Pro Max. And this was pretty interesting because you can see here that Instant Digital shared this post on Weibo with the milliamp hour figures for these models. So it shows the 16 Pro as having a 3577 milliamp hour battery and the 16 Pro Max having a 4676 milliamp hour battery. And thanks to Mac Rumors, we can see the improvement over the 15 Pro and Pro Max. So the 16 Pro could have a 9+% improvement over the 15 Pro, which is big. And then the 16 Pro Max looks to have about a 5% improvement over the 15 Pro Max. So it looks like battery life could be better for the smaller Pro this year, which is a big deal because for the past 2 years, I've noticed that battery life is definitely worse on the Pros than the Pro Max. Like obviously, the Pro Max has a bigger battery and everything, but just in general, the battery life has not been great on the base model Pros for the past 2 years for me. Also this week, Apple announced their Q3 earnings. So we saw quarterly revenue of $85.8 billion, which is up 5% year over year, and a quarterly earnings per diluted share of $1.40, which is up 11% year over year. And then as far as the breakdown for sales, the iPhone made up for $39.3 billion, which is actually down 0.9% year over year. The Mac had $7.01 billion, that was up 2.5%. iPad, which was really surprising here, had $7.16 billion. That was up almost 24% year over year. Wearables, home, and accessories was $8.1 billion. That was down 2.3%. And then services were $24.21 billion, which are constantly growing. That was up 14% year over year. So overall, pretty solid, but China revenue was still lower than expected, which is big because China is a big market for Apple. So still slumping over there in China sales. And then finally, as tradition, let's talk about another crazy AirTag story. This time, a New Jersey man was set to fly out to Columbus, Ohio to attend the MLS All-Star Game on a United flight. But his flight was canceled due to weather after he had already checked his luggage. But thankfully for him, he had an AirTag inside that suitcase so he could track it down if he needed to. And oh boy, was he happy to see that he had that AirTag inside, because when his flight was canceled, he was told to go to baggage claim and find it, but it wasn't there, of course. However, he was able to tell from the Find My app that the suitcase was off of the plane, so it wasn't still on the plane. So he spoke to a United employee and they said they'd deliver the bag tomorrow for free. But the next day rolled around and yep, you guessed it, no luggage. And even worse, the luggage was back on a plane and leaving the airport, and it ended up in the middle of Ohio. But United's bag tracking system did not show this, so the employees thought that the bag was still in New Jersey. But when he told the employees that he was tracking the bag with an AirTag and Find My, they realized that it had been loaded onto that flight to Ohio. So they put his bag on a flight back, and when he drove to the airport to retrieve it, United texted him saying, "We're still looking for your delayed bags." But thankfully he ignored that text message because he was able to track it himself. So once inside the airport, he enabled Find My's precision finding feature so that once he was about 20 feet away, it told him to go straight and to the right, leading him straight to his bag next to the baggage claim. But without an AirTag, he might have never seen that luggage again. So let this happen to Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney, and let's see how he changes his tone about the Find My network. But that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button down below if you've not done so already, and I'll see you next week.